So if the Fed funds rate is at neutral, it is very close to zero. Stimulating the economy means they hit the zero lower bound and can't do it. Interest rate adjustments doesn't work. That's why all this quantitative easing comes in, because that's the stimulative tool, right? Start buying all these assets out there and try to lower the interest rates out there on the yield curve and try and bring some sort of stimulation to the economy through the idea of these asset purchases and the flooding of money going into the system, or the flooding of credit, really, because the flooding of money doesn't actually go into the system without the lending of it. So this is why quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 failed to produce the inflationary scenario the Fed was looking for. It created a hyperinflation scenario expectation, but it didn't come out into the reality of it, because all that money had to be lent into the system. And that money being lent into the system did find its way into houses and cars and stocks and bonds and stuff like that, but it didn't necessarily raise the cost of living, because that's not where the money was being lent into. So now we have all this money stimulation that took place, and we had a severing of the supply chain. When you sever the supply chain and there's nothing left out there on the shelves after everybody took the stimulus check, went down there and cleared them out, and getting new inventory in was being blocked by people being forced to stay home and mandates and everything else, then it's going to be pretty obvious you're going to have supply-demand imbalances. On comes the inflation. And that inflation scenario is exactly what the Federal Reserve was looking for. They needed that inflation. It was unfortunate for all the people who suffered the consequences from it. It really was, because what they did is they inflicted some major pain and even death to some people in order to get this thing done. Now, the raising of the interest rates was all about having a higher inflation scenario. And if you don't raise the interest rates and you in an effort to combat the inflation scenario, then you will have a neutral interest rate that remains close to the lower bound of zero, and you will have no way of really dealing with the economy in a fashion in which that people would typically understand being a mechanism of lowering interest rates, of interest rate adjustments. Since that doesn't work, it becomes a psychological game. And this is exactly what we are in now. Think about this. If they can keep the inflation expectation elevated, right? And this is the goal. You can see it within the mainstream media. A few months ago, everybody was like, inflation's going down. Fed won, whatever, right? Cut rates 7 times. No, I mean, I don't know how many people actually believe it. I know I didn't. But if you think about it, like, if the Federal Reserve is in a position in which that the economy, business decisions and everything else has a higher inflation expectation going into the future, we believe that inflation is going to be running rampant for a considerable amount of time. That will begin to pull the neutral interest rate up. This is something very important. This is something that is not communicated anywhere. I am the only person I know of who's talking about this. But you think about it, just think about it logically. If it was a low inflation expectation that drew down the neutral interest rate, and it wasn't just the inflation expectation, there was a lot of things that were leading up to that. There was a heightened demand for safe and liquid assets like U.S. Treasuries. There was an elderly population. There was a slowdown in global growth. There was all these things that were taking place all at the same time. The Federal Reserve was losing it. They were like, man, what are we going to do? And there was people like Ben Bernanke who way the hell back in 2020, not 2020, even 2002, 2002, 22 years ago, was thinking about this exact scenario, going, we're going to hit the lower bound of zero, the neutral interest rate is going to be low, and we're not going to have a monetary policy. What are we going to do? He knew it then. He said, you know what? We can have an imaginary gold machine. And with this gold machine, this imaginary gold machine, we'll be able to produce as much gold at will with very little cost of energy. And the moment that this information gets out, that we have this machine, it will drop the price of gold instantly. This was literally the story that he told within the speech. That is the credible threat. they knew it back then. They knew it over 20 years ago that we would be here. See, this is why, like, the idea of, politicians put it's Biden's fault, blah, 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 and I'm like, ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. If you don't understand that it was a plan, not a plan, this was an expected thing with a plan backing it to be here, knowing that this was going to take place, knowing that it was going to be about their words, flapping their gums, and not necessarily the adjustment of interest rates. You want to know, like, how crazy I feel sometimes because I cannot find anybody else who talks about it. Like, I feel like I'm literally the only person out here. You know how hard it is to know that you are going out on a limb by yourself, that I still care. I mean, I will go up against anybody out there who believes that there is something different happening with monetary policy. They are wrong. This is it. This is the monetary policy, the way I describe it. It's not any other way. I'm not trying to say that I'm not accepting of other ways. I've looked at the other ways. I've listened to other people. I've tried to find it. I've looked. I'm like, man, every single thing I've ever read from anybody is not incorporating certain aspects of the monetary policy that the Federal Reserve talks about within their speeches to each other that they do not communicate to the public out there, and nobody else is seeming to pick up on. Flexible average inflation targeting. Google those words. Take a look and see how many people are actually communicating flexible average inflation targeting as the policies. And this is the policy. It's not a 2% target. August 27, 2020. Powell's speech. Google it. Right? That's the one. And you can see it for yourself. It's just like, to me, it's just like, how is it that not even the mainstream media will even bring this up and talk about it? And then when they do, nobody else sees it. Like, they even brought it up right in front of Congress. Right? Congress brought it up. Jerome Powell said it, right? Said that, that they were not going to adjust rates when they got down to a 2%, because that's not what they were going for. And that they would review the monetary policy at the end of the year. Right? Like, not even change the idea of what it is that they're attempting to do. So let me bring it up here real quick. This is, I gotta show you. I got all these damn speeches. There we go. Powell, August 27, 2020. Look it up. Okay. Right here. This is it. This is what everybody missed. So we got 775 people watching. I'm sure a bunch of you have already seen this. There might be a couple of you who are new to the channel. But this is it. This is how you know that everybody else has got it wrong. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be cocky or arrogant or, something of that nature. If I come off that way, that's not the way I'm trying to sound. That's not the way I'm trying to be. But I am trying to tell you that everybody else has got it wrong. And if it is sounding cocky and arrogant or whatever, then so be it, right? Okay, this is what he said August 27th. We have made important changes in regard to price stability side of our mandate. The mandated to do two things: low and stable prices and full employment. On the long run, he goes on to say, our long run goal continues to be an inflation rate of 2%. The long run. Our statement emphasizes that our actions to achieve both sides of our dual mandate will be most effective if the long-term inflation expectations, not the inflation expectations, remain well anchored at 2%. However, if inflation expectations, if the real inflation runs below 2% following economic downturns, but never moves above 2%, even when the economy is strong, currently above 2% for some time. And this was reiterated by Michelle Bowman just a few weeks ago within her speech about monetary policy. I don't know why it is. Why is it that nobody else sees it? I mean, if the Fed is lying, everybody is believing it. The Fed isn't lying. The Fed is telling the truth, right? nobody wants to believe it, or just doesn't understand it, or choosing not to dive deep enough into like the language of it for the past decades, right? Which, I mean, I know everybody can't be obsessed over the economy like I am, but thankfully you're here watching my videos because I am obsessed over the economy, and I'm obsessed over the Federal Reserve's monetary policy and the speeches that they give. And because of that, you get the benefit of like hearing me give you the theory on what it is that's truly going on here, because I just can't see it any other way. Like, once you see it, you can't see it any other way. It's just like, man, that is what they're doing. You know? And it's totally working. That's what's blowing me away. It's just like everybody who's like, and I understand why, right? Like, I can understand why it is that they believe that the Federal Reserve is lying, because if you go and you look for your information coming from the mainstream media is absolutely clueless. Like, clueless about the monetary policy. Like, I have never seen anything as lame of information as anything. Like, the only time I've ever seen this lame of information about a particular subject was when it came to the mainstream media, and it's probably because of how much I knew